Hey, brothers and sisters from the StarkNet ecosystem. Welcome back to the Star Cafe. This is Nur Star speaking, your personal Star barista. And once again, we are ready to delight you with some very special StarkNet content. Well, my dear fam, what an epic and unforgettable StarkNet week that we're about to close on today's Star Cafe. I'm sure most of you know that the StarkNet scaling solution has undergone the so-called quantum leap upgrade, which improved its performance exponentially. So, the whole ecosystem is very excited about it. And on top of that, today we're also ending the Nethermind Stark Week with its third and final session. During the previous episodes, we dived deep into the overall Nethermind journey on StarkNet, and we also learned a lot about the Juno full client and the benefits that it brings to StarkNet in terms of decentralization and beyond. Well, in order to end this Nethermind Stark Week in the best way possible, today we're having a look at the many educational initiatives that they've been contributing to around StarkNet and above all around the Cairo programming language. And who's better than Hani, the Cairo wizard, to accompany us in this trip to Cairo? So without much further ado, let's get this session started by welcoming Annie from Nethermind. Hey, Hani, welcome to the Star Cafe.
Hi, everyone. Super glad to be here. Thanks, Nurstar, for the invite.
It's a pleasure to have such a Cairo OG at the Star Cafe. So I'm very excited. Thanks a lot for coming. And also thanks a lot to Nethermind and to Anneli to setting this session up. And well, having said that, I know, seeing that you're not only a very talented member of the Nethermind team, but you're also very known and beloved by many devs in the StarkNet community. So I would like to hear a bit about your background, how you joined Nethermind, and what's been your experience in building on StarkNet so far. So why do you think StarkNet has a great potential when it comes to scaling?
Yeah, so just to set up the background, so I started learning about crypto a few years ago. It was in 2017, where I got my first GPU when I was in high school and started mining Ethereum. And ever since I stayed around the ecosystem until I got into university, and I started engineering studies and most specifically software engineering studies a few years ago, where I learned a lot about computers, programming, engineering, software, and well, I was still having that interest in crypto on the side. And so I think the first interaction I had with well, not StarkNet, but Starks at least, it was with a game named Gods Unchained, which was like some kind of Hearthstone game on chain, like you were playing with cards that were stored on chain as NFTs on StarkX. And I started developing like tools and content around that game. So I had to like interact with their API servers, learn a bit about Starks, how it worked, how we could like sign messages and everything. And so that was end of 2021. And then a few months later, I remember that there was a hackathon organized by Encode Club around StarkNet, and I participated with a colleague of mine at university, and we released a very simple DeFi app on StarkNet at the time. It was called Star Combo. It was some kind of Furu Combo DeFi app that leveraged multi-calls so that you could interact with multiple DeFi protocols in one single page. But we did not continue working on that. And so I was looking for a summer internship, and I definitely wanted to do that around blockchain engineering. And I stumbled upon the Nethermind internship program that at the time, yeah, there was like this. I don't even remember how I found the page, but I was just looking at my bookmarks and I saw that I bookmarked that page. In the description, they had like a huge amount of teams working around Ethereum, working on MEV, working on StarkNet, working on security, the Solidity development and everything. So I just applied. And I started my internship at Nethermind in May 2022. So initially I thought I would be more interested in like DeFi research than just like coding and engineering, but as a matter of fact, not. And I spent most of my internship working with Starknet development team and coding smart contracts in Cairo. And after that, I stayed working at NethermindWeek during my studies. And yeah, I think the other question was why. Well, it was about Starknet and scalability. Is that right?
Exactly, Annie. Yeah.
Yeah. So not just about scalability, but about Starknet as a whole. I've met a lot of great people to conferences and online interactions that were building on Starknet. And it was like really, really great at the time because everything was so new. Like the network was so new. I remember that at the beginning, there were like not many people inside this ecosystem, so we would always interact with the same people. And I was like super happy to be able to like contribute to the primitives, even doing like basic stuff. Since nothing existed, it was like great. And now, like fast forward 1 year, we have like amazing teams working on Starknet. We have like Stalkware has a great engineering team. I love like watching them working on the Cairo compiler live. The 0.12 update has proven to be like a major success. I think now Starknet is probably like one of the fastest L2s. Even though it was like a few weeks ago, it was one of the slowest one. And so that's like really impressive and great when it comes to like imagining what the future is going to be. It's also extremely pleasant to use. I was not a heavy user of DeFi on Ethereum because I hated the UX. It was so hard to do like any operation. But on Starknet with, I'm not going to say account abstraction, I'm going to say smart contracts wallet. Smart contracts wallet are awesome. It makes things very easy interacting with DeFi, NFTs and everything. Super great. So I think it's not just about scalability, it's about also what the networks brings when it comes to user experience. Of course, scalability is important because if your network is congested, your UX is going to be bad. But right now, we don't have these problems anymore, at least for now. And also one thing that is great in Starknet is how involved the community is in making the network better. We have tons of external contributors working in like an open source manner, allowing the space to move super fast. The speed at which the space is moving is like pretty incredible. Every week we reach milestones that I thought would initially not be possible to reach that fast. And yet, yeah, for scalability, I have to mention Volition, which would be extremely interesting to allow the fees on Starknet, and specifically to onboard users for which even the current transaction fees on Starknet, I think it's around 50 cents per transaction, 20 to 50 cents is a bit high. Having a like Volition mode would allow us to get very cheap transaction and I would say democratize the use of cryptos and blockchain if our transaction become very cheap.
Awesome, Henny. What a very interesting and inspiring background and story. And I was laughing a bit with inside myself because I can imagine the experience of mining Ethereum at the high school, during your high school years. Because yeah, that made me feel a bit old. Because I finished the high school like in 2007, sorry. And then also, yeah, I discovered Ethereum only in 2019. Actually, I was living in Berlin when Ethereum was launched, but at the time I didn't know anything about crypto. So anyway, better later than never. And having said that, let's start diving deep a bit around Cairo. So as we know, Starknet supports a different language than Solidity, Cairo, and such a language is very young, right? So, before being used on Starknet, it had only been used in building StarkX. So, Cairo is a programming language created by Starkware, for those who still don't know that. And so, my question is, by being so young, once Starknet was launched in Q4 2021, I suppose that there were very few educational resources around this language. Do you remember like how those times were like? how was it like to learn Cairo basically on your own? Which were the first resources that started popping out?
Yeah, so it's actually like coding field. I only knew about StarkNet, not StarkX yet, so I was not trying to code anything in Cairo. So I came like around Q1, end of Q1 2022, which is already 3 months later, and a lot of work had been done. But I know that Sylv and Lancelot from Break were there. They were one of the first team building on StarkNet, and they told us about how miserable the developer experience was. They were basically like some kind of beta testing the network and the language like publicly, because yeah, before that, Cairo was a language that was, I think, only used for StarkX products like DYDX, ImmutableX, and other things like this. And I don't even think there was some kind of documentation, because the language was used by its inventors itself. It was probably something, but very, very restricted. And when we came in 2022, I think there was a documentation, because I remember that we were reading through the documentation, and Cairo was presented as a non-deterministic language, which is a language in which it was like very, very confusing for us. I remember that we were studying Cairo in the blockchain engineering club at uni, and at first it was super confusing, because the way it was presented was very different from the way it was actually applied. And I think at that time, if I did not have the public Discord channel where I could ask questions to have help on the Cairo problems like syntax or how to do things in Cairo, I probably wouldn't have gone that far. Probably would have ended up leaving the ecosystem, because at that time it was really, really poor on documentation and the language. In opposition to the Cairo we have now, I'm gonna call it Cairo Zero. Cairo Zero was not very easy to pick up. It was almost impossible unless you had someone that knew it well and could help you debug it, things like this. But hopefully the documentation started getting better and better in the next month. And we had more and more people writing content about Cairo, about how to create contracts. We had the Open Zeppelin token standards. And then we had like community guidelines about how to write Cairo contracts, community conventions, sorry. And everything got progressively better, like near Q2 2022, end of Q2, I would say. I think the first resources we had were Pirama's notes and RoboTeddy's notes, which are, I don't know them, but I think it's two guys that were very early on StarkNet and had been very digging through the language and seeing how we could use this language in a more idiomatic way. So yeah, like the biggest resource was just 2 blog posts on someone's personal website. And then shortly after, we had OnlyDust that started working on Starklings, like the original Starklings for Cairo Zero, and organizing workshops for Cairo and everything. But yeah, that was in the past. Now everything has changed. We have like the StarkNet network itself is very well documented with the StarkNet book and StarkNet docs. The Cairo language is being documented at the moment with several initiatives like the Cairo book or StarkNet by example. And it's a lot better to start developing on StarkNet now than it was 1 year ago.
Absolutely, yeah. I can imagine that. And thanks a lot for highlighting to us how the Cairo educational landscape looked like in the early days. And as you said, many advancements and many educational efforts have been done since then. And we can already see, that right now also the educational path to learn Cairo is obviously better structured. There's also more experience in dealing with it. So also, I guess, experienced devs like you can also help, new beginners, Cairo beginners, in a better and more efficient way. So yeah, as you said, we will be, we can rely on the Cairo book right now, and also on StarkNet by example, which are 2 resources that we'll be speaking about in the following questions. But before going on with our last session of the NethermindWeek, I would love to shout out to some of our listeners. So yeah, hello Fricoban from the StackNet ID name domains. Hello Antiro from Casal Labs. Hello Fabio Catalao, Starkians, Robert, Antoine. A lot of very skilled developers here. I'm so glad to have you here, guys. Antoine is also, if I remember well, an independent Starknet security researcher. Then we also have Nadai, who's moving his first steps on Cairo and is already killing it. And shout out to Bart, also from Voyager BD. Hello Ademola, hello Mart, Kodawari, and all the others. Thanks a lot for being here. And Annie, let's speak about the Cairo book. So how did the Cairo book come out? You know, how did the idea behind the Cairo book come out? Were you the first to think about creating such an initiative? Tell me a bit about that, please.
Yeah, so actually the Cairo book, in the way it exists now, there was an initiative to start it before we did. It was, I think, Trang that started it and wrote like one chapter of the Cairo book. And I remember that we were with some other Starknet builders in a co-working space. And I think it was during the time where Onlydas was doing a Starknet chalet in France. Because we had a phone call where we were like, like some builders were thinking, okay, Cairo 1 is out. That means Regenesis is coming soon. That means that we have to transition our whole infrastructure from Cairo 0 to Cairo 1. However, there's no way currently for us to do that because none of us knows how Cairo works. I think at that point, the only resource around Cairo was probably a blog post that I wrote in January that outlined like the major guidelines of the language, which is not very descriptive, but it was like the only documentation there was for a while. Oh yeah, and I think right before the Cairo book, I was working on creating Starklings, so probably between February and March. So just before the Cairo book, so we keep like the timeline in order. There was Starklings. I think it was started by Shrami, but there was like only 1 or 2 exercises implemented, just the introduction. And I was like, oh, that's a bit of that's sad. We have like this Starklings repository ready to work with Cairo, and we cannot use it because there's only 2 exercises. So since I had been almost like reverse engineering things from the compiler, I had quite a good understanding of the language at that point. So I was creating exercises in Starkling so that people could interactively learn about Cairo and its syntax directly from their code editor. But the only problem is that when you're stuck, you don't have any documentation to refer to. So the logical things that comes next is writing the documentation. And in that case, we're thinking that having a book that covers everything from 0 to 1, let's 0 to 1, like Cairo 0 to 1, would be a great thing. And so I remember everything started in a phone call where we're like, okay, we need to like start doing the Cairo book. We need to create the documentation, because if we're going to wait for someone else to do it, then we won't have time to board our infra in Cairo 1. So let's just start it now. I think it was in March, mid-March. And so that's how it started. With a few contributors to the Cairo book, we just very quickly set up the base of the book, like what were the available data types, how was the syntax, how can you create functions, how do you, at the beginning it was like only functions mostly. So the first contributors, I think, were Zarbok, who's actually in the space, and Antoine, Fricoben. Yeah, and so yeah, that phone call was with Ben from Starknet ID, which is here as well. And we're like, okay, we're going to start doing the Cairo book. And then I asked Swapnil at Nethermind, and I was like, hey, I have this great idea. Since we have to we're super involved in the Starknet and Cairo ecosystem, because we have development services, we have audits and everything. So why not just contribute to writing the documentation of the language, and that will give us a lot of expertise in the language which it will make things a lot easier for the future. And so Swapnil will say, yeah, sure, that's a great idea. And so that's how I started working quite a lot on it in April. And I think in 2 weeks, like beginning of April, we had covered like probably like 70% of what the book is now. And ever since we're just like adding features, correcting some stuff, refactoring so that the maintenance of the book is easy. And now you'll see that with every Cairo upgrade, the book is going to be upgraded as well. And the syntax is going to be correct because we have continuous testing of the syntax that makes sure that it's always in line with the last compiler version. And yeah, so that's how the Cairo book started, and that's the current state of it. And that's probably one of the best resources if you want to start developing in Cairo, because even if you don't have, well, I would not recommend starting your development career, programming career with Cairo. You should probably start with something simpler at first, like probably, I don't know, Python, JavaScript, or Rust. But even if you don't know programming, you can actually start doing things in Cairo because the book is very oriented towards beginners. And if you're not a beginner, you can just skip the lines that explain everything, take a look at the examples and the titles, and you have a global overall idea of how the language is built and how it works.
What an amazing explanation of the Cairo book. I also believe that the Cairo book took the Cairo educational experience to the next level. And as you said, it was, the idea was came out during the Chalet initiative by Only Dust. So, having fun always brings a lot of creativity. And it also came at the right moment. So some months, like 4 or 5 months ago. And, at that time, a lot of new developers were starting to get interested into Starknet and Cairo. So I'm sure the Cairo book helped a lot and will be helping a lot of developers moving their first steps on Cairo. And having said that, I was scrolling down the Cairo book's GitHub, so I will take advantage to thank the contributors who have been, working on this amazing educational activity. I think they deserve it. So shout out once again to Fricoben from Starknet ID, Nadai, who translated the Cairo book in Spanish, Glim, is very active on Madara, on the Madara sequencer as well, Clement Walter, VOT, Pia, Crypto Nerd, CN, who translated the book in Chinese, Arget Lames, Giulio Fora, Aresh Gedia, Darlington Nam from Argent, Tiago Neto, Omaz, Shramis Rivastav, and Daniel Beja, who's also here. So shout out to all the contributors of the Cairo book. And well, Henny, let's move to the last educational resource that we'll be speaking about today, Starknet by example. What is it, and how it is structured?
So for those for the people that know Solidity, there's high chances that you know Solidity by example, which is a repository in which you have examples of how to do pretty much anything in Solidity. So it covers the basic, how can you, like the difference between constructors, external functions, public functions, and everything. So the goal with Starknet by example was to have a more condensed resource. That's not oriented towards beginners specifically because there's not a lot of explanations. However, if you already, for example, if you come from Solidity and you're like, okay, I want to deploy a contract, how can I do? You just go to the Starknet by example page. You see that there's a section about constructors and you're like, okay, I want to initialize the state of my contract when I'm deploying it. How is it done in Cairo? You have a very clear example. You can just take this example, put it inside your editor, and start working from that. So the goal was pretty much to not onboard people that don't know programming from zero, but more onboard people from other programming languages that already know about the concepts. But if you don't know anything, it's fine as well. You're probably going to have a few questions that the book is going to answer. For example, some stuff are not very explicit. You only have like an example of how to use things. So if you want to have like the full explanation, you refer to the Cairo book, if it's there yet. And if it's not, you can just play around the examples. But more than just presenting StarkNet by example, so for example, a great thing that is that you can present how to do very basic apps on StarkNet. For example, so Jules, who's an intern at Nethermind, has created an example of how to make a DeFi vault on StarkNet. So this is strongly inspired from the existing Solidity by example vault. So for example, when a user deposits a token, you calculate how many shares the contract is going to mint. And when you withdraw, you burn the shares, calculate how the yield, and withdraw both the yield and the initial deposit. And so it's very great to have these examples available, because when you don't really know how to structure your contract, when you don't really know what are the correct patterns, what is the conventions around like casing, like how to declare your storage variables, where to put your external functions, your internal functions, this is where you will want to base your contract on, because that's, so this should be discussed as, for example, a StarkNet improvement proposal. But for example, casing, it's great if all the contracts deployed on StarkNet use the same casing conventions. And when you look at the StarkNet by example contracts, you can directly see what's the correct convention to create a contract, how exactly you should write your contract, how your documentation in your contracts should be made, how you can test your contracts, and all of this with a very quick lens. You don't have a lot of boilerplate explanations that are not required. You go straight to the point. And like probably if you don't know anything about StarkNet, but you do know Solidity, you just read through StarkNet by example, you play around for like a few hours, and like in a few hours, you're probably ready to do some basic contracts. Yeah. So that was the idea behind StarkNet by example.
Very well, Henny. So I was giving a look at the StarkNet by example.voyager.online, and you'll find this tutorial at this address. And stupid question, but which is in your own opinion? Which are in your own opinion the examples, the better examples, and the most interesting examples for people who start playing with StarkNet by example? What do you think? What's your favorite as well?
So it depends. If you already know StarkNet, I think the most interesting example is the upgradable contract, because with a Cairo, I'm not saying the one because now we need to stop saying the one, so I'm just going to say Cairo in opposite to Cairo 0, but we don't have the proxy pattern anymore. We have specific syscall that we can use to replace the class of a contract. So on StarkNet, classes are how the contract behaves, and contracts are classes plus a state, which means that a class does not have a state, but a contract has a logic and a state. So yeah, I was saying that because you can now directly upgrade the class of the contract without doing a proxy pattern using a syscall called replace class syscall. And so if you want to make your contracts upgradable, but you're coming from Solidity or you're coming from Cairo 0, you might not have any idea how to do so, and you might start working on a proxy pattern, which is not what you should do. What you should do is just create an upgradable contract. This is very straightforward and simple, and like you can have I think in the 2 minutes read, you understood everything there is to know about how to upgrade a contract on StarkNet, just by looking at the StarkNet by example page. And the cool thing is that since we're working with contracts and not pure Cairo code, we actually have deployed these contracts, and you can interact with them on Voyager. We did not include the links yet, but it's going to be like in a few days. We're going to include the links, and then you can see the example on the StarkNet by example page. Go to Voyager, start playing with the contract, see how it behaves, and then draw any conclusion you need of this. And after that, start playing with your own contracts.
Amazing, Henny. Well, we're coming to the end of this this session and of the NethermindWeek Start Week. But before doing that, I would love to have an open conversation about also the future of educational initiatives around Cairo, and also about ways to onboard new devs into StarkNet, and also if we could find ways to talk Web2 devs into Cairo and StarkNet. So I would like to invite all the all those who would like to say some words and about Cairo, about the educational initiatives around it, about the ways that we could about ways that we could improve the educational environment in the future, in the next months. Feel free to send me the request to speak, and I'll be glad to grant it to you. In the meanwhile, I start asking this question to Eni. So Eni, what kind of other initiatives could we be building in the future? And also how can we manage to onboard more devs into Cairo and into StarkNet?
That's a great question. I think the next step is not to onboard devs with content. It's to onboard devs with purpose, which is to present them. Okay, here is StarkNet. What can you do on StarkNet? Why should you build on StarkNet and not something else? So I think the next step of onboarding devs is not to give them like content, because we already have that. I don't think there is the need for more documentation or content. We just need to improve what currently exists. But we need to find purpose, like make them stay, work on something for a few months, for a few years. And so one great thing is for on-chain games. I would say that's probably one of the next advantage of StarkNet. With like the Dojo framework, we can onboard the next devs working on on-chain games. Yeah, I would say that. Just finding purpose for the devs is the next step, not creating more developer-oriented content. Yeah. So also there's also something great is present what you can do on StarkNet that you cannot do on other chains. I know that like smart contracts wallets are probably one of the biggest thing we can explore regarding user experience and how to make things better compared to other chains. And eventually, that's probably how we are gonna make things. Because for now, it's a bit hard to find for now, I don't think there is anything on StarkNet that is entirely innovative and in production. So most of the DeFi apps are like Uni V2 forks or like some kind of Curve and Uniswap merge. There's nothing really innovative, but we have seen some builders from Ethereum or other ecosystem manifest interest in StarkNet, and some of them start like doing big projects on StarkNet. So I think the future is going to be very interesting because of that. And the recent upgrade of 0.12 is going to draw a lot of attention on StarkNet, because if we have a very like fast and pleasant to use network, then that means that we are going to be able to retain users, and we can develop great protocols on StarkNet if the user experience is great.
Great. Onboarding devs with purpose. I love this slogan, and I think it will go a long way. We'll also use it for sure in the post promotion of this session. It deserves it. And well, we have Beja, one of the contributors of the Cairo book, who would like to say his views and his consideration about what we said today. Hello, Beja. Thanks a lot for coming and for interacting.
Hey, good morning. Thanks, Nur, for bringing me on. I really just wanted to give Yunai a shout out. I truly think your impact, or the impact you've had and will continue to have, I'm sure, on StarkNet and the community as a whole, is truly remarkable. I mean, for entry-level blockchain developers like myself, resources like the Cairo book, I mean, they're really game-changing, right? So yeah, I just wanted to thank you for that. It's a shame you won't be in Paris next week, but I'm sure we'll meet one day.
Thanks, Budge. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm kind of sad I cannot make it to Paris that year, but hopefully next events, I hope.
Absolutely. Looking forward also to meeting Annie at the next event. I will also be in Paris. So yeah, I'm very sad as well that I won't be able to meet you, Annie. Anyway, I'm sure we'll have more opportunities, a lot more opportunities in the future. And yeah, so I believe the future of Cairo is very bright, also thanks to people like you. And so shout out to all, the contributors who built educational content around Cairo, who have been, and all those who have been helping new devs to learn this programming language. So I mean, you are a very precious resource for the StarkNet ecosystem, and we're all very grateful for that. So once again, thanks a lot, Annie, for coming to this Stark Cafe session. And obviously, I would also love to thank Anneli from the Nethermind team to help me out in organizing this amazing Nethermind Stark Week. I had a great time. I also saw there were many people who attended all the 3 sessions. So I really appreciate that. I'm very grateful for that. And yeah, having said that, thanks a lot once again to all the listeners, to Beja, to Antiro, to George, Starkens, Robert, Credence, Zarbok, Micha, Nadai, BD, Kodawari, Kobar, Nadamela, Milika, Mart, Country, Crypto, Gibaitig, and all the others. And I hope to meet a lot of you in Paris in the coming week. So next week, actually. So thanks a lot for coming to the Stark Cafe, for enjoying the Nethermind Stark Week. And it's now time to close. Enjoy some Cairo music afterwards. I will be playing it a bit. And having said that, remember sharing the StarkNet vibe, and see you the next time.